Welcome. Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah.
It is nowhere near any of those.
Valentine's. That's the holiday.
Welcome back to Whiskey and Wine. I'm Sam,
I'm Heather.
and today apparently we're wishing you just old holidays, but no, we're talking about some general tips for attending and hosting a wine tasting event so that it will run smoothly and you're not going to get yourself into trouble. So, let's dive right in.
Having a theme. Like a holiday. See what I did there?
Nicely done.
Thanks.
The first thing I always say is have a theme. And I don't know, it doesn't
have
always
to be complex.
Yeah.
Yeah. The theme could be really simple. It could be about the types of wines you're going to be tasting. It could be just related to the closest season. It could be, it's Friday and we survived at work. Or you could go all out and do the full decorations and everything. Kind of just depends. There's a large range in how you could work with your theme.
You could make a theme be as specific as we are doing Bordeaux, or we are doing just French wines, or Italian wines, European wines.
Or your favorite wines.
Yeah.
Which is all over the place. You have no idea, depending on the group you're inviting.
You can really do this however you want, and don't let figuring out a theme really dictate if you're going to do it or not, because a theme can help just drive the night, but it's not fully necessary. You could just go, hey, everyone bring a bottle, and then you just have bottles from all over the place, and that's going to be just fine. However, I do think that having a theme, it does give the night some structure. So say you're doing Spanish wines. We just did a Spanish wine event a while ago.
Oh, yeah, that was so fun.
And it just lets you kind of focus in a little bit more. And if you want to do some nerdy research about like the region or something like that, you can dive into it. You're going to see some really interesting parallels. But themes aren't needed, but I do say it does help. So
it also helps give expectations too. I think sometimes people have this perception that a wine tasting is kind of like a snob thing. I'm not qualified. Or they might have some level of anxiety about going to this type of event if it's not something they're familiar with. So if the theme is bring your favorite wine, they're like, well, I have this wine and I really like it and I'm going to bring it and share. Or if it's something more specific, it would give them the opportunity, if they wanted to do some research on it. Plan for food. Be safe, y'all.
yeah.
Drink responsibly. Or Wisconsinably.
Responsibly.
Don't drink Wisconsinably.
So the reason I always say you should plan for food is not just planning for food beforehand, but that is part of this. Actually, I think number 3 I have written, eat beforehand.
Eat before people.
Always make sure that you either eat before or that you are going to have food with the wine. That you're going to have food with the wine. And if you're going to do pairings, that does get a little bit trickier because you do have to think about that a little bit more. But just as simply as, hey, here are some cheese, crackers, fruits, things like that. Or if you were going to have some pasta dish afterwards, just something that is going to allow you to have some food in your stomach so you're not just drinking way too much wine throughout the entire night. Some amount of food is highly recommended.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like having a charcuterie board or something like that is always just fun.
It's easy enough to prepare. You literally just go to the store and buy whatever cheese calls to your heart, and then you put on some crackers, and then you just chop it up, and people can just grab it as they want throughout the night. It's not something that has to be timed appropriately, depending on, if you wanted to go all out and make a more complex dish, that could be way more involved. But this is something you can chop up. You could saran wrap it, put it back in the fridge until guests arrive for the cheeses. So it's something that's easy to prepare and, makes you look like a good host.
What is the 4th one?
It's a tasting, not a drinking.
Yep. When you're doing this, let me. So
Ooh, yes.
If you were to do a tasting with this glass, you should really only be filling it up to about like right here. Like that's it. You don't want that much wine here. You don't want to do a actual pour, which an actual pour is 5 ounces, correct? And most people are pouring like up to here. This is a 5-ounce pour. So this is a tasting.
We don't have any of our tinier glasses here, actually.
No.
Sometimes we don't actually have a ton of them, but we do have smaller actual tasting glasses too.
So when you're doing it, just remember this is a tasting. You're trying to experience all of these different wines, see how they taste, see if they're actually good, see what you're liking. And then if you find one that you're like, oh, I want to spend some more time with this, that's where you also plan for food afterwards. Then you can do your big pour of it, whatever you want, and then you can spend a considerable amount of time with it then, instead of trying to have a giant pour of it and maybe not liking it or feeling that you have to drink the whole thing and then getting yourself in trouble.
Yeah, I think that brings us with our next point too, especially if you're tasting wines that you've never had before. It's very possible that you try it and you're like, this just isn't for me. And again, if you're doing small enough pours, like that's okay, and you can have those, like, what do we say, dump buckets?
Yeah, dump bucket or a spit bucket.
Or something where it's just to, again, if you don't want to finish it, it's okay to just pour the rest of your tasting away. But if you're pouring a 5-ounce pour for every single wine, one, you're going to be going through a lot of wine. People may kind of feel like they have to drink something that they may not really enjoy. It just may not be what's their preference. And then, maybe someone who really likes it is just then heartbroken because, like, it's not being enjoyed.
Yeah.
So definitely considering, the palate of everyone you have, you can always pour more later, like you said.
One of the things I always want to say with the spit or dump buckets, you can do this very simply. Like we were at an actual wine event being put on by a wine store, and they literally gave us red Solo cups as our spit cups.
So easy, right?
It's super simple. Don't think it has to be like a really nice bucket or something like that that looks really cool like they have at most actual wineries. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Just get some red Solo cups or some other plastic cups, whatever, so people can spit it out if they don't like it or if they aren't drinking right now and they still want to taste it, whatever it may be. Keep it simple though.
Our next tip was to have a note sheet. I think,
yes, I don't have any of them. They're all put away right now.
Oh no! We have some note sheets that we laminated, and I think that's been really helpful when we have people over who aren't necessarily like writing it down in a notebook where they want to keep, but then that way you can kind of just mock up your notes and write those notes to yourself, and then we can continuously reuse them. Alternatively, if you have a wine tasting book that you keep for yourself, that could be something fun to bring to an event.
Always having little wine notebooks. They're little tiny things you can just buy on Amazon for like $7 or something like that, and they have a ton of pages in them. But the reason you want to have a note sheet and then also, the next thing, a tasting wheel is, excuse me, you want to have these things so that when people are trying to figure out like, okay, what are the flavors of this wine? So you can kind of talk about it a little bit more. It's going to help to have a little bit of guidance. If you, like, if we just had 2 glasses of wine in front of us right now and we both just tasted it, we're going to still be kind of grasping at flavors. It's going to be a little bit harder than when we have our notes sheet and our tasting wheel in front of us, because then we can actually see something and go, oh, yeah, I can see that there is smoke in this, or there is a strong cherry flavor or blackberry flavor or something like that. And then you can always reference it again when you're going back to your notes. Like, oh, yeah, I thought this one was really good because of X, Y, and Z. It's just a fun conversation piece. Because if you don't have that conversation piece, that's like half the fun of a wine tasting.
Yeah, is experiencing that with the group and hearing what other people, like, what words they use to describe it, I think is always really fascinating. Because someone might say something, I might be like, oh, I'm getting that's fruit forward. And I'm like, I don't know what fruit it is. And then somebody might be like, is that strawberry? And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's strawberry. And
strawberry.
Yeah, that's the best flavor. But like that's what makes it fun.
Yeah.
Is trying to kind of pick out those flavors and having that experience of bouncing it off of each other. Excuse me, bouncing it off of each other. If you, I guess this kind of applies if you're the host or if you're just bringing a bottle, but to do some research on the bottle. I think something that I always enjoy doing at a tasting is there's a couple wineries in Wisconsin that we were able to know really well. Um, they were even like single varietal wines, and I was like, oh my gosh, this year I like better than this year. So when I take those bottles to a tasting, I'm able to share my experience that I had on that winery with the group. And I think that is always something that is kind of a fun, if you're able to give any backstory, whether it's a winery you've been to, talking about, what makes this grape unique. If it is a blend, maybe trying to research like, hey, what grapes are in this blend of wine that you really love and are sharing with us. If it's something like an ice wine, maybe not everyone knows what an ice wine is. So, just having a little moment to be like, hey, like this is what an ice wine is, and that's why I think it's so cool, and I'd love to share it. So, honestly, it could range from anything of like, hey, I Googled it right now, and this is what Google says, to, again, sharing like a personal memory that you have of that winery. Whatever range, wherever you're at, just having something to share, I think always kind of sparks the conversation. Again, it kind of might resonate with someone else being like, oh my gosh, wow, I've like seen that bottle maybe at my local grocery store, but I never thought about it before. Oh, the order, like whites to reds.
Yeah, so this is more of just a
Yeah.
general tip. Anytime you're doing a wine tasting, more specifically if you're doing one where you don't know what people are going to bring, because if you do know exactly what's happening, you can kind of plan this out. But otherwise, just assume that you're going to be doing whites to reds to desserts and then dry to sweet. The reason you want to go in that way is if you start with a red or a dessert, you might stain your palate a little bit more as well as your glass, and then the whites aren't going to taste quite as good. And then if you do the same thing with the sweet versus the dry, that sweetness is going to be overpowered, or going to overpower the dry. And again, not going to get all the flavors that you're supposed to. So that's just more of a general tip when you're doing a tasting. And if you don't know what a wine flavor is, so if you didn't do the research, well, then you might end up putting something in the wrong spot. It's not the end of the world, but
yeah, if you're having an event where it's everyone's bringing a bottle, just kind of do your best to
best judgment.
Shake it out in the order. But again, it's just you and your friends kind of thing. And you get it slightly wrong, like it's not that big of a deal,
It's fine.
Oh, if there is an order, or like if it is where people brought multiple things, also let people know it's okay for them to like pass, maybe. Like if somebody knows that they just do not like Tempranillo, like it's okay that they don't drink the Tempranillo that someone else brought.
And it's okay to also tell
it's
someone.
okay to, try something tiny, a tiny amount outside of your comfort zone if you're willing, but obviously you're never forced to do anything.
But yeah, it's okay to, if you're like, I don't like this wine, I know I don't like it, just like, yeah, I'm not going to try it. Someone's like, oh, why aren't you trying this one? Just tell them, I know I don't like this style, so I'm going to pass, thanks. And if they poo-poo on you for that, that leads us to actually some of our don'ts.
Yeah, don't be a snob.
Do not be a snob. So if someone doesn't like a wine, don't be like, oh, well, you should like this wine because it's from this classic region, blah, blah. No, you don't have to like everything. Everyone's tastes are very different. And that's okay. So allow people to have their different opinions. And if there's a wine you're like, ooh, I do not like this specific flavor I'm getting, someone's like, oh, I'm not getting that flavor. There was a really funny wine that we had experience with where someone gave us a bottle of, I think it was a Cabernet Sauvignon, but it said like blackberry Cabernet Sauvignon. And it was just all blackberry. Like that's all it tasted like. And they were like, it's delicious. And Heather and I are like,
I was like, it was just too much for me. It was way, I was just like, I tried and I was like, ooh, like not my profile, not my palate. Yeah.
And that's fine.
And that's okay. Like, again, that's why you're going to a tasting. If you want a bottle to drink that you know and love, then you buy the same bottle every single time. If you want to, explore the world, see what's out there, you go to a tasting.
The other big thing when it comes to being a snob is trying to over-explain the wines. So I really love to get into the nitty-gritty details. However, I don't do that unless someone asks me. I'm not going to explain everything about that region, that varietal, say like, oh, it's got a 5 acidity, a 4 alcohol, 0 sugar. I'm not going to get into all that.
Mhm.
I might say, yeah, this is a Cabernet Sauvignon from California, from Sonoma, from this winery. What do you guys think? What might say the year, but I'm not going to get into any of the nitty gritty details because not everyone cares.
Yeah.
So if someone asks, like, "Oh, hey, this one's really interesting," and then they ask you more details, then you can give them the details. But don't try to knowledge bomb people because no one likes a know-it-all. No one likes to show off. But if someone asks you, then feel free to give them that information.
And the last one, again, we already touched on a little bit, but no poo-pooing on other people's opinions. Because again, everyone's palate's different.
Yeah. The main thing I'd say is when you're doing a wine tasting event, one, try to keep it a little bit relaxed because wine does have a regal air about it. So you don't need to try to make it fancier than it is. It's already going to feel fancy. It's already going to feel fun. So just relax, enjoy it, be civil with each other. If you're doing this with coworkers, for example, this is a really good opportunity to just like kind of break a little bit more of the ice between people, I guess. So keep it chill. And if you want to nerd out with your friends about it, nerd out. But don't feel like it has to follow a specific template. These are just some general tips to hopefully make your wine tasting event go a little bit smoother and make it so you can have a little bit more fun. So I hope you guys will have a wine event, or if you've never hosted one, just consider going to one. There are different stores that will throw them, or you can find them online. There's some really big ones that go on. Like I know here in Cincinnati, they're getting ready for one of their biggest wine events, again, that they do every single year, and it's massive. So maybe consider going to something like that in your city. But I highly recommend doing it and just experiencing some new wines and maybe making some new friends along the way. But as always, glad you guys are here. Hope you have a good week. Cheers.
Cheers.